Welcome to War Bios, the podcast where we delve into the intricacies of military history's most pivotal battles. Today, we're going to explore one of the most decisive engagements of the Revolutionary War, the Battle of Cowpens, fought on January 17, 1781. This battle, though often overshadowed by more famous conflicts, stands out as a masterpiece of tactical innovation and strategic consequence. It was here that Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Morgan, with his contingent of Continental troops and militia, confronted the British forces under Lieutenant Colonel Bonestry Tarleton, in a clash that would prove crucial to the ultimate defeat of the British in the Southern theater. By 1780, the American Revolutionary War had entered its sixth year, with the British, under the command of General Charles Cornwallis, seeking to exploit the perceived loyalist strength in the southern colonies. Their strategy involved securing key cities and territories, hoping to strangle the rebellion by controlling its supply lines and bases of support. The humid summer air of 1780 was thick with tension as British forces moved to consolidate their gains, their redcoats a stark reminder of the imperial power that sought to crush the colonial uprising. The summer of 1780 was marked by a series of British victories, most notably the capture of Charleston, South Carolina, which gave them control over one of the largest ports in the colonies. The city's fall was a devastating blow to the Continental cause, as it provided the British with a strategic foothold and access to the vital trade routes of the southern colonies. This success was followed by the Battle of Camden, where General Cornwallis defeated a Continental army under General Horatio Gates, further solidifying British dominance in the region. The defeat at Camden was a stark reminder of the challenges faced by the Continental forces in the South, where Loyalist sympathies ran deep and the British army seemed almost invincible. However, the British strategy of dispersing their forces to control territory created vulnerabilities as it stretched their supply lines and made them more susceptible to guerrilla warfare. The vast expanses of the southern countryside, with its dense forests, swamps, and rural communities, proved a perfect breeding ground for partisan warfare. Rebel groups, often led by charismatic leaders like Francis Marion and Thomas Sumter, began to harass British patrols, disrupt supply lines, and launch surprise attacks on isolated outposts. It was within this complex and volatile landscape that Daniel Morgan, a veteran commander known for his unconventional tactics and deep understanding of the terrain, was tasked with disrupting British communications and supply lines in South Carolina. Morgan's command consisted of approximately 1,000 men, including seasoned Continental troops, militia from various southern colonies, and a contingent of cavalry. Morgan's strategy was to lure the British into a pitched battle on ground of his choosing, where he could utilize the superior mobility of his forces and the terrain to offset the British advantage in training and discipline. He selected a site near the Broad River, known as Cowpens, for its defensive potential and proximity to British lines. The area was characterized by open fields, wooded areas, and gentle slopes, providing an ideal backdrop for Morgan's tactical genius to unfold. As Morgan positioned his forces at Cowpens, he was aware that Lieutenant Colonel Bonestry Tarleton, notorious for his brutality and tactical aggressiveness, was leading a British force in pursuit. Tarleton's men were largely composed of Loyalist militia and British regulars, totaling around 1,150 soldiers. The days leading up to the battle saw both commanders engaged in a cat-and-mouse game, each attempting to outmaneuver the other through a series of skirmishes and feints. Morgan, understanding the importance of morale and the unpredictable nature of militia forces, took great care to select a defensive position that would protect his flanks and allow for controlled retreats if necessary. He also made sure to keep his men informed about the impending battle, using his charisma and experience to boost their confidence and prepare them for the challenges ahead. As the early morning mist began to lift on January 17, 1781, Daniel Morgan's forces were arrayed in a defensive position at Cowpens, carefully chosen for its natural advantages. The Continental troops and militia formed a double line, with the more experienced soldiers in the front and the less seasoned militiamen behind them. To their left, a small contingent of cavalry under Lieutenant Colonel William Washington stood ready to provide support and exploit any weakness in the British lines. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and wood smoke from the previous night's campfires. Meanwhile, Banastre Tarleton's forces emerged from the morning fog, their drums beating out a cadence as they approached the American position. The British commander, confident in his own abilities and those of his men, saw an opportunity to crush the rebel forces once and for all. As he rode forward, he spotted Morgan's lines and, with characteristic impetuousness, decided to launch a direct attack without bothering to reconnoiter the terrain or await the arrival of his artillery. The British troops advanced in a series of ragged lines, their formation disrupted by the uneven terrain and the haste of their approach. As they closed within range, Morgan's front line opened fire, unleashing a withering volley that cut down many of the British soldiers. The Americans then retreated to the second line, where they reloaded and prepared to face the next wave of attackers. The sound of musket fire echoed through the landscape, punctuated by the screams of the wounded and the dying. Tarleton, undeterred by his initial losses, pressed the attack, urging his men forward with cries of "Charge!" and "Push on!" The British troops surged forward, but Morgan's defensive position held firm. As the battle raged on, Washington's cavalry played a crucial role, charging into the fray to strike at the British flanks and rear. The American horsemen proved highly effective, exploiting the disorder in the British lines and causing widespread panic among the enemy troops. One notable incident occurred when a group of British soldiers attempted to flee, only to be cut down by Washington's men as they tried to cross a nearby stream. The water ran red with blood as the British soldiers fell, their bodies carried away by the current. The intensity of the fighting was such that, at one point, Morgan himself became embroiled in the melee, using his sword to deflect a British bayonet thrust. Despite being outnumbered, the American commander remained calm and composed, directing his troops with a series of clear and concise orders that helped to maintain their cohesion and discipline. His presence on the battlefield was a steadying influence, inspiring his men to fight on despite the ferocity of the British attack. As the morning wore on, Tarleton's forces began to waver, their morale sagging under the relentless pressure of the American counterattacks. The British commander, realizing that his position was becoming increasingly untenable, attempted to rally his troops for one final push. However, it was too late. Morgan's men had gained the upper hand, and the British lines were on the verge of collapse. In a last-ditch effort to stem the tide of defeat, Tarleton ordered his remaining cavalry to charge the American position. The British horsemen thundered forward, only to be met by a wall of musket fire that sent them reeling back in disarray. As the dust settled, it became clear that the Battle of Cowpens had been a decisive American victory, with Tarleton's forces suffering heavy casualties and his command structure in shambles. The aftermath of the battle saw Morgan's men tending to their wounded comrades and taking stock of their spoils, which included several hundred British prisoners and a significant quantity of arms and equipment. The American commander, aware that his victory would not go unchallenged for long, began making preparations to withdraw his forces and reunite with other rebel units in the region. As the Americans departed the battlefield, they left behind a scene of utter devastation, with the bodies of British soldiers strewn about the landscape like autumn leaves. The once green fields of Cowpens were now stained red with blood, a grim testament to the ferocity of the fighting that had taken place there. Despite the carnage, Morgan's men felt a sense of pride and accomplishment, knowing that they had dealt a significant blow to the British war effort in the South. For Daniel Morgan, the battle marked the culmination of his long and distinguished career as a military commander, one that would earn him a lasting place in the annals of American history. As Morgan rode away from the battlefield, surrounded by his victorious troops, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction and vindication, knowing that his unorthodox tactics had proved instrumental in securing a crucial victory for the Continental Army. The memory of the battle would stay with him forever, etched in his mind like the scars on the landscape. As Morgan's forces withdrew from the battlefield, the warm sunlight casting long shadows across the landscape, they were met with a mixture of relief and jubilation from the local populace. The news of the Battle of Cowpens spread like wildfire, carried on the whispers of excited townsfolk and the thunder of horse hooves, reaching the ears of General Nathaniel Greene, who was commanding the Southern Department of the Continental Army from his headquarters in Charlotte, North Carolina. Greene, recognizing the significance of Morgan's triumph, quickly dispatched reinforcements to support his victorious troops, ensuring that the momentum gained at Cowpens would not be lost. The aftermath of the battle saw a marked shift in momentum in favor of the Americans, as British forces under Lieutenant Colonel Bonestreet Tarleton were forced to regroup and reassess their strategy. The defeat at Cowpens had dealt a significant blow to British morale, and their control over the region began to wane like the ebbing tide. As one historian noted, the Battle of Cowpens was a masterclass in tactical genius, as Morgan's clever use of terrain and clever deployment of his troops outmaneuvered the British at every turn. The very landscape itself seemed to have been transformed by the battle, with the rolling hills and wooded areas now bearing witness to the bravery and cunning of the American forces. In the months that followed, Morgan's victory would prove to be a crucial turning point in the war, as American forces began to gain the upper hand in the Southern theater. The Battle of Guilford Courthouse, fought on March 15, 1781, would see Greene's forces clash with those of British General Charles Cornwallis, resulting in a Pyrrhic victory for the British that would ultimately contribute to their downfall. Rather, it was the result of careful planning, meticulous preparation, and a deep understanding of the terrain and the enemy. Morgan's use of the double envelopment tactic, where his forces attacked the British from both sides, was a masterstroke of tactical genius, one that would be studied by military historians for centuries to come. The human cost of war is often lost in the grand narrative of battles won and lost, but it is a crucial aspect of understanding the true nature of conflict. At Cowpens, the British suffered over 800 casualties, including many wounded and captured soldiers. The Americans, on the other hand, lost just 72 men killed and 161 wounded. The families of those who fought and died at Cowpens would never be the same, their lives forever changed by the brutal realities of conflict. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, I'm General Biography reminding you to keep marching toward victory.